G.K. Chesterton said, "I owe my success to having listened respectfully to the very best advice and then going away and doing the exact opposite." Now, on the other end of the spectrum is one of the great ancient philosophers who said, "Let man be wise by instinct if they can, and when that fails, be wise by good advice." So your challenge here today is, do you take the advice of Sophocles and be wise by good advice? Or do you take the advice of GK and go the opposite direction? So listen to the panelists, listen to their perspective, and then you choose at the end. Okay, so let us get started. The first question I really want to start with is to frame our perspectives. We're talking about advisory boards. So the question is, and I direct this one to Marissa to start with, please. Let's start with defining what an advisory board is. Is it important for it to be formal? What about an informal? If you're just talking to your neighbor, is that an advisory board? At what point what are we talking about here?
So can I give a little background just to frame why I'm qualified?
Sure.
Why I'm qualified, I guess, to answer that question. Is this on? Okay. I'm Marissa Levin, very happy to be here. I am an entrepreneur, CEO, and I have two firms. My first firm is Information Experts, which is a 19-year-old government contracting firm. We serve about a dozen different agencies. We're in the e-learning, education and training, marketing, strategy, and human capital space. And then I have a second firm that I started 2 years ago where I work with small businesses to put in their entire middle layer process. So especially for government contracting firms, to be able to be successful in that space, they need to have a business development strategy, a proposal development strategy. They need to have an infrastructure in place where a repository where they store their past performances and their proposals, and they need a compliance strategy, and they need a complete middle layer process in order to respond effectively and efficiently to the opportunities that are out there and build the infrastructure and the people they need to go to the next level. So I work with businesses to put that infrastructure in place and then to coach the CEOs and the executive teams to get past their obstacles to keep moving forward. About 5 years ago, Information Experts, we had been up and down and up and down, and I'm very happy to say that after all the sequestration stuff, continuing resolution, lowest price technically acceptable, terminations for convenience, all the other alphabet soup in the government space, I'm happy to say that once again we're going back up. But about 5 or 6 years ago, we hit a place where it was very much the wild, wild west in my company, and we had 75 different projects going on at one time. We didn't really have a lot of standardization, a lot of process, and one of my mentors said to me, "Have you ever thought about putting in an advisory board?" And I said to him, "I really don't know what an advisory board is." And he explained it that it's a formal group of people that you hand select to fill in the gaps in your company to get you from one level to the next. So I thought, that sounds great, and I'm very process-oriented. I went out, and there was no information anywhere on how to do it. So I went ahead and I created a process, and that's the book that's on the back. I created the first model ever out there on how to build advisory boards called SCALE, how to select, compensate, associate, leverage, evaluate, involve, and exit. So to answer the question, I believe an advisory board is a very formal group of people that you hand select using a strategy, that you align those people specifically to the holes in your organization, and every single person on your board has dedicated swim lanes with performance-based structure that get you to the next level. Now there are other structures of advisory boards, and I do talk about them in the book. There are usually, when a company starts, they'll go to friends and family. That's usually what they do first. And I will tell you that typically doesn't work out, because our friends and family don't understand who we are, they don't really know what we're doing, and they're just not qualified to be advisors. Then typically, a lot of times, we'll go to peer advisory groups, which are also excellent sources, as well as formal advisory groups, but those are kind of like group therapy, where you're with other CEOs that help you figure out CEO challenges. A dedicated advisory board are people who are committed to your company, inside your company, and are committed specifically to getting your company to the next level. And it's very different than a board of directors, and we can talk about that later, about fiduciary responsibility, responsibility to employees, things like that. But long story short is that an advisory board is absolutely a hand-selected, formal group of advisors that can supplement other advisors. So
okay, excellent, excellent. And I think our purpose here is not really to get into board of directors kind of that's a whole different realm.
it is a different realm, but people ask it all the time.
Sure. Now that we've kind of defined what we are talking about, what we want to get into is how to find those people. Marissa talked about it a little bit. I failed completely to say that I do want to point out who exactly we have up here. You've seen their bios, you know who they are. This is Tony Arrieta from the Department of Homeland Security. And so we've asked Tony because Jose, because his perspective is from a government entity. You know, how do we care about whether or not you have an advisory board, and what are success factors for your company? On the other end, Small Business Administration, Ralph Buchanan. You know, Ralph has a tremendous perspective working with SBAs, small businesses, and having been a former leader in a couple of different small companies. So he's been on both sides of the house. And then Pete Russo with Morgan Stanley. And Pete's perspective is as a wealth advisor to your company and creating value in the company and that. So this is the perspective we have. So with that, how do we find those people that Marissa talked about? And Pete, I'd like to direct it to you and then Ralph. And by the way, anybody can answer on any of these questions. If you have any comments, feel free to jump in. So Pete, how do you find them?
So I would say one of the best ways to find them is to go to organizations where there are individuals that you say, hey, if I met this individual, this is a person who could certainly help my business grow. To Marissa's point, you want individuals that swim in specific lanes. You want the advisory board to be able to help drive business your way, as well as give you leadership in certain areas and structures and disciplines that maybe you don't have a core competency. So, for example, if you are looking to get into contracts with a specific agency, I would go out there and look for somebody that could be a mentor and somebody that could be on the advisory board that may have the ability to make introductions to individuals that can help drive business within that organization. One of the other things that I see that sometimes people don't think about as they're building an advisory board is specific disciplines that can help the internal structures of your company. For example, the biggest hurdle that I see companies is usually when they get to right around about the 10 million in revenue area, usually the business owner is also the individual that's doing the business development. And right around that 10 million, you usually have 35, 40 employees from what I've seen. And all of a sudden, that individual that drove that business is now having to work on HR issues, compliance issues, 401k issues. They're having to deal with the bank. So all of a sudden, their time is being sucked away from some of those operational issues and has taken away from their ability to drive business and do what they do best, which is business development. So I would also, as you're looking for an advisory board, also look for weaknesses within your organization from an operational structure. So not just individuals that can go out there and help you drive business, but also individuals that can step in and say, hey, listen, here's what I see. Here are the gaps that you need to fill in order for you as a business owner to be able to go out there and do business development again. So I would say, places like this, the individuals up on this panel, and Jeff and you, we all have connections at a lot of different organizations, whether it's private equity firms, things of that nature. That's, a lot of what I do, working with individuals from private equity, investment bankers, things of that nature. So have the ability to go out there and find individuals that can fill some of those gaps. So I would not only look for, individuals that can help drive business within certain areas, but also individuals that can help you internally kind of manage the processes and disciplines.
Ralph, your perspective.
These guys are pretty awesome, These guys are pretty awesome. I'm just glad to be here. Hey, when you look at advisory boards in general, I come from an outsourcing background, so I want to try to explain that first. You have 24 hours in a day, and you're going to be working 24 hours in a day, right? And so you got to find a way of leveraging who you are and the time that you have on the things that are critical to growing your business. Just as a brief, I know there's books out here. So there's a book by, I don't know the guy's first name. His last name is Berger. It's called The E-Myth Revisited. Familiar? Talks about the three minds of the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur, the manager, the technician. So if you're sitting down in here and you're looking at things from a technician, a billable, oh my God, what am I going to do today? Let's make this coffee. You're not thinking about growing your business. That's why these boards are important. Okay? So the one thing I tell people is to look at, as was stated, look at the holes that are in your organization. Look at where you want to be as an organization and try to recruit those individuals. Like Marissa was saying, you can, and I recommend that you do it. Go out there on LinkedIn, for example, use some of your groups, if you will, on LinkedIn, start cultivating those relationships. But those people, just like in business development, there are people that can get you to A level, but they might not be able to get you to the level. Okay, so look at your organization, your connections, and see the people that you can make those connections with today. But look at someone who can be a little bit more influential to take you where you want to be. Because sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you get in it. Okay, so that's the main thing I would say.
I actually have a little bit different perspective. My father started a company when I was 8 years old, and the interesting about your quotes at the beginning, he always used to tell me, like, you don't listen to advice if someone's telling you what to do. He's like, find somebody that's going to identify the challenges that you are going to face as you go to grow your company, and who's going to brainstorm those challenges with you. And I'll tell you from a federal perspective, if you're a company that does $200,000, $300,000 worth of business annually, and you're trying to get to that $2 to $5 million revenue range, how are you going to bring people on to get to that range? Do you have partnerships so that you can actually bring those people in to help you actually go and execute that work? If you're at the $5 million range and you're trying to get to that $14 million range, and I'm kind of just making up general numbers here, that could be, it depends on the business line you're in. What are you going to use to allow yourself to grow? You only have past performance at $5 million. But to get to that $14 million mark, you're going to have to create some type of partnership, whether it's through a joint venture, whether you're doing some contracting work, to show that you can actually execute that work. You're also going to have to let agencies know when you meet with them that you have a plan to address those fundamental weaknesses, because every single person that does business with the federal government, the first thing that we look at is, well, have they ever done anything that on this scale before? No, they haven't. And a lot of times that can mean, well, we're just going to move on. I don't think they can perform this work. But you may actually have a real plan in place that outlines how you're going to actually be able to execute that work. And we know you can do it at a lower cost. If you state it, you're probably going to be able to do it at a lower cost because you don't have that overhead. So you need to think about the challenges you're going to face. You always start with the end in mind. If the end is over the next 5 years to grow to $14 million, what challenges do I currently have to get to that point? And then who can I find that can help me with those challenges? And I think the last point, LinkedIn and these type of events are really great. Make a list of 10 people that you know that have been successful. Maybe Marissa's one of them. And say, hey, can I get 10 minutes of your time? And I just want to hear about the challenges that you faced in growing your business. Maybe ask her one question. I'm sure she'll have a number of feedback off of one question. You wouldn't even have to ask another. And then before you leave, say, do you know anyone else I could chat with to get more perspective? And I guarantee you'll find advisors that can give you very targeted feedback. And as you go through that process, after 3 months, you'll be more educated than you were at the beginning of the process. So just a couple things to keep in mind.
Or read her book.
Okay. Oh.
Can I just mention one more thing? Just to piggyback on what you were saying. You made such a great point. It's really important that you balance out the internal build out of your company with the external build out of your company. Business development is key. If you don't have a customer, you don't have a business. I mean, that's just the bottom line. However, especially in government contracting, winning one contract can literally put you out of business if you do not have an infrastructure in place. If you don't have a financial infrastructure, if you don't have a delivery infrastructure. Jose, I'm sure you'll agree with me when I say the worst thing that can happen to a government contractor is winning a contract and failing to deliver. So if you do not have an infrastructure in place to be able to adequately deliver, it's over. And one of the things that we did with our advisory board, one of the people that I got on our board many years ago, and I got her on just for this one purpose, because advisory boards are fluid, they're dynamic, and if you're growing and you're doing something right, you may actually evolve out of the need up for certain advisors, and you'll bring in others. So one of the things that we needed was, I wanted a project management office inside my company, because we had so many projects and we had so many project managers and so many different agencies that you want to be able to move from being hero-centric, okay, exactly what we were just talking about, where everything revolves around the business owner. You want to move from being hero-centric to being process-centric, so that the company is not at the mercy of a few key people, that if something happens to those people or they leave, that the contract or the company is going to fall apart.